rubber boat. The mosquitoes were not out yet in full force, so it was pleasant. My exploration found nothing but some flattened swamp grasses, which could have been from deer, beaver, or muskrat, as no bare ground was exposed. When I finally cut my sleuthing short and returned to my camp, I discovered that I had been visited. My tent was leaning in one corner, my backpack had been ransacked, and it looked like something or someone had checked out every item out of curiosity because nothing was damaged. My guest had inspected everything, and some packs of snacks and cookies were strewn about and short on content, so whatever it was had helped itself to a snack. But I guess my noisy return had evidently frightened it off. I don't pack too much gear, as I have a fiberglass tote that I pull, and it looked to me more similar in physical shape to a man than an animal. It did not have the bulk of an ape or the shape of an animal accustomed to walking on all fours. I scrambled for my phone to get a photo, but by the time I dug it out of my pack, the creature had departed, and I don't know to where. It could have seen me looking at it and hidden on the other side of the knoll, but I waited for another 10 minutes before giving up, as I had a long drive home. As a professional businessman, I can tell you of my experience because one of those feet up one tree who spotted what looked like hair. One of the boys climbed up the tree and brought the reddish-brown colored hair down with him. I contacted a friend that had a connection with Southern Oregon University, and he agreed to take the hair sample to a biology lab they have on campus. It was determined to be actual hair from an unknown species. They were all baffled. I also talked to one of my neighbors about this incident. The same night, she had heard several ear-piercing screams that she described as hair-raising. 2 weeks later, 2 of my daughters had gone horseback riding up into the mountains behind our house. The horses began getting nervous and spooked before they had gotten far. As the girls started looking around to see what was bothering the horses, they heard some cracking sound in the bushes. As they looked in that direction, they saw a creature that was theirs, and they were disheartened to see chunks of the forest burnt to a crisp. As they hiked through the misty morning air toward their favorite fishing spot, a place they dubbed Trout Heaven, they gasped at the sight of the ashen tree trunks rising from the ground like ghosts. Mike grumbled about mismanaged forests and water resources leading to the fires getting out of hand year after year. John just shook his head and said, "I feel bad for the poor animals that once called this area home." He was especially concerned about the black trout heaven. What kind of nonsense? His voice trailed off as both men froze. The loud crack of a tree branch echoed through the woods behind them, followed by heavy thudding footsteps. Mike felt his breath catching in his throat as he watched John stand up slowly, not taking his eyes off the woods. Too heavy to be a deer. Bear, maybe, John whispered. The footfalls moved closer before stopping about 50 feet from where they stood. Mike finally worked up the nerve to peer towards the woods himself, and immediately wished he hadn't. Standing between 2 charred pines was a creature the likes of Mike had never seen. At first glimpse, that looked somewhat bear-like, covered in dark fur and easily 7 or 8 feet tall, even while crouching. It peered back at them through dark, deeply set eyes, shaded under a heavy brow line. But as Mike took in more details, his mind jaws were gritted teeth, demanding they make a break for it. But John waved him off. "Can't you see he's just watching us? I ain't leaving unless he gets aggressive."
And all you had to do was ask, because Dr. Squatch is pretty much throwing away soap with this new deal. Right now, when you buy 3 soaps, you get 3 more totally free, with crazy refreshing scents and ingredients so natural it can make a grown man cry. This deal is one of the best on the market right now. Actually, I dare you to try to find a deal.
Crinkling the sandwich wrapper. With a quick swipe of its long arm, the creature snatched the sandwich and leapt a good distance away in one effortless motion. As the men held their breath, the creature examined the sandwich closely before devouring it in 2 huge bites. "A peace offering," John said with a chuckle. The creature licked its large fingers and lips greedily. Feeling encouraged, John grabbed a couple of beers and called Mike over. Mike refused, making John snort. "And you call me a wuss? Come on." Warily watching the calm creature, Mike crept over. John passed him a beer and lifted his own toward the creature in salute. To both men's shock, the creature mimicked John's actions, picking up a charred stick and tapping it against the tree trunks with a dull thud. It then bowed its head toward them before turning and ambling back into the scorched forest. The friends stood in astonishment. I was making a mess of things. My thoughts turned back to Miss Freya's journey on the Pacific Coast Trail, and I began thinking that if I were to do something similar, it just might be the cathartic help I needed to heal. Early in 2014, I began making my own plans to hike the Pacific Coast Trail, but not all of it. I decided I would only do the Oregon portion, starting from the Columbia River and heading south. I determined to be as well as I could, but whoever or whatever was still heading in my direction. I looked up, and standing there looking at me was the biggest man-beast I had ever seen. It was covered with dark brownish-orange fur and had to be over 7 feet tall. It had huge hands, and the feet were even larger. It bent down to look at me, and suddenly it grabbed me, picked me up, threw me over its shoulder, and carried me away. By now I was petrified and sobbing, but I knew I didn't have a chance to get away. It smelled pretty rank, like I would expect a bear to smell.
Hey man, it's my Chef Business card on my phone. Thanks to the next dedication to small businesses like ours. My name is Chef Ronaldo Linares, and today I am taking you inside to show you what our private dinner looks like. A key ingredient for me is having small business insurance. Next insurance makes us
I wasn't sure how to treat me. It lifted up one of those big meaty hands and began to stroke my head, like you would pet a dog. The creature had streaks of blood in its fur, and I wasn't sure whether it was from my wounds or from whatever had taken place at my campsite. By now I realized this was a Sasquatch, and he wasn't going to harm me. I think he was quite old. The hair around his lips and ears were white, and his hands were gnarled, as if he had arthritis. Ready to continue. I looked at the Sasquatch, and he looked sad. He must have known I was ready to leave. I think he must have been lonely and enjoyed my companionship. He again petted my head and gave a big sigh. I stood up and put my pack on, took a deep breath, and gave the Sasquatch a quick hug. We walked outside the cave, and he pointed to a trail that wound back to the Pacific Coast Trail. I was back up there in no time at all, and when I turned to look back toward the cave, he was still standing there watching. I waved and then started on my way. I thought about returning to my old campsite to see if I could determine what had taken place there, but I decided to leave it alone and put it out of my mind. It took me 3 days to get to Callahan's lodge, and although I wonder what happened to the 2 men that tried to hurt me, I didn't say anything to anyone for long hikes, so we stayed with my brother in Portland. As we descended the trail, we did stop at some grave sites, and then we turned around to go back to the main path again. We heard a loud thump and a crashing back by a tall cliff that overlooks the wide clearing where the graves are. Not seeing anything move, it would have been natural to assume that the rocks just fell from the cliff and bounced toward us. We weren't scared, but we were concerned. There was no reason at all for alarm, was simply a lifelong desire on our bucket list. With our machete and a collapsible army shovel, we soon cleared a truly beautiful spot for our camp. We then cut some pine branches and made a crude lean-to covered with evergreen boughs to give us a feeling of security, even though it was totally open in front. It gets dark early in the forest and cold very quickly in these mountains, especially camping so close to a stream. We created a circle and surrounded it with rocks, and in the center we placed our propane stove, with the flame very low, out of respect for the beautiful forest. That night we heated beans and roasted weenies for dinner. Fortunately, we had spent a lot of time practicing shorter hikes in the Mount Hood National Forest back home, so we had the basics down pat. We made the decision to pack up and leave. We moved out as best as we could, each carrying a machete and with 2 fluorescent lights clipped on our sides, flashlights in our hands, and we must have looked like giant fireflies as we made our way back up the trail from where we had come from. It was much harder finding our way back in the dark, and just when we thought we were safe, a large dead tree branch came sailing from behind us. We didn't hear anything until it hit Jim in the back. Jim grunted loud and fell to his knees, so I took out my camera and mini tripod, leaving my backpack just below the large dead snag that stands as a lone sentinel on the mountain. Being extra cautious, I made my way to the crest, where in summer the black flies totally cover the peak, and they start biting 25 feet from the top. I could almost feel the little varmints as I got down and carefully crawled the last few feet and ever so carefully peeked over the top. So if there was a photo up, I would capture it. Crawling on my stomach and knees, I had my camera ready as I inched my out-of-shape frame up so I could scan the lake below. East Tanner Lake is not visible from where I was, but rising up carefully and hoping for a prize-winning photograph, I slowly surveyed the area and saw 2 black-tailed does and watched as they took one of the well-defined winning photos. All I had to do was trigger it by pushing the button. If you've ever been on Tanner Mountain, you know how the safest ascent sort of curves around and wraps in a sort of spiral. So I carefully turned to my right and followed the trail as it looped around the dead tree that was probably alive when the Mayflower made landfall. As I made the corner and dropped below the tree, I saw my backpack. It was running through the large meadow about 500 feet below me, and it was in the hand of a huge tree.
There's a Thursday workout out the way. Tomorrow, probably come out here and do some shoulders. Probably just keep the same format that I did last week. Tuesdays and Thursdays are primarily always going to be chest days. I think on Tuesday I'll work in some rows and probably some shrugs with the chest. And on Thursdays I'll probably do some curls with the chest. Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm gonna do legs on those days, but it's in a secret location, so I ain't filming there. But I also do lat pull downs when I'm in there. I just do leg extensions, calf raises, and hamstring curls with some lat pull downs. That's what I do on both of those days. And Friday, from this period of time on until February, which is Misery Road. Fridays will be, I'll come do shoulders, and I'll come out and do arms Saturday, and I'll do an extra chest day or either just do whatever the fuck, you know. But I think I'm gonna keep that format to finish out this until I get up to, yeah, I'll keep that format for the next probably month and a half, 2 months. That little format or fucking template of workout schedule or whatever, weekly schedule, you know, that's what I think I'm gonna try to stick with, and try to do ab work too on each one of those days. Now that's something, man. Some people, you know, they weasel out of doing legs, and they weasel out of doing cardio. You know, everybody got something they don't fucking like, including myself. I don't like doing the ab workout, but fuck, I want my shit to get cut up, you know, so you got to do it. So I'll do it as much as I can, force myself to do it. But you know, sometimes that little guy deep down inside of you that don't want to do shit, that just wants to be lazy, sometimes he wins, you know, and that's okay. It ain't okay, but as long as he don't win the majority of the battles, it's alright. Shit, man, I ain't gonna stand out here and babble around too fucking long. I got shit to do inside, so let me get on in there. Y'all take it easy, man.